start with the application of using survey data to address macroeconomic question. And we have three main topics about the application. First, we look at the role of consumer inflation expectation on the economic decision making. And then the second topic about firms inflation expectation and firms business decision. And the last topic is about central bank communication and trust in the central bank. So today we start with consumer inflation expectation and economic choice. And we base on several papers to see how people will apply survey data and survey experiment to answer the question. So the first topic we're looking at some side effects about consumers inflation expectation, and it's based on a paper by Francesco Apunto and Michael Weber. They are two superstars in using survey data to address macro questions. And the title of this paper is Why Survey-Based Subjective Expectations Are Meaningful and Important. And in this topic, we see in several questions. First, how do consumers form inflation expectation? And what are the role of demographic characteristics? What is the relationship between inflation perception and expectation? And what are the main economic formation sources to form inflation expectation, and how forecast errors vary over time? So here's the first pictures. This is from the data of the New York Fed consumer expectation surveys, and the data here is from start of this survey from 2013, July until 2023. And here's the aggregate country data from the survey, and here we can see that with the bottom 10% times, and here is the upper 10% of the distribution, and here's the gap between the top 10% and the bottom 10%, and the black line here and the solid line here is the mean of inflation expectation, the average inflation of the population over time, and the last line here is the median levels. And the red line here is the headline inflation expectation, but it's a P plus 12. P plus 12, it means that it's a realized inflation in the next 12 months. Red line here. So we know all the data, the survey data already, and here is how they aggregate data to different nations. And now you have 2 minutes to look at this picture and tell me what to see, what is the highlight from this graph, how the people form expectation vary over time. When you compare median and average, the mean, and the difference between the top 10% and bottom 10%, and how it links with the development of the actual inflation rate.
This person.
Like in January 2020, like overall, the top 10% seem to move in line with the headline inflation. But say for example, in January 2020, the bottom 90%, right? They kind of like how to say, like is it correct to say that they expect deflation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because here it's from 0 to minus 10%, right? So the top at the bottom 10% of the distribution, the expectation
Deflation.
March of 2020, the COVID started. So exactly at this point. This point. But here is a
COVID-19.
And most of the time, what people expect is higher than the real headline inflation,
Yeah.
except for the period of 2020 to 2000 and to the middle of 2021.
yeah, exactly. So you see that most of the time the median of inflation expectation or the average inflation expectation rate is higher than the realized inflation rate, right? So it like that people in general upward bias, right? And but during this time of high inflation, so from 2021, when inflation start going up in the US, the people start the mean inflation expectation now is quite close with the actual inflation rate. So during this time of inflation, when it start going up, the gap between the mean, the average inflation and the actual inflation rate is close to each other. But when the inflation start going down, the actual inflation rate will going down. But the inflation rate expectation on average still keep going high, and the gap is too large. So say that when inflation going up, people they pay more attention to the news about inflation. So that's why the gap between the actual inflation rate, the realized inflation, and the inflation expectation is then smaller, or the error is smaller. But during this time of low and stable inflation, people they pay less attention to the news about inflation. So that's why the average inflation expectation is significantly larger than the realized inflation rate, or the upward bias is significant. So that's first thing. And if we look at the difference between the median and the average, here we also see that the average inflation rate always higher than the median inflation rate. So what are the things? Is the left skill distribution or is right skill distribution? It means
Is life still?
yeah. So if we look like this one. This one, right? And then we have the average is somewhere here, but the median is here. So here is the median, and here is a
Average.
mean.
Yeah.
Okay. We always on this higher distribution. And now one more thing. Now if we look at the difference between the top 10% and the bottom 10%, what you can see how it varies over time.
That is why it's
Yeah, right skew, yeah. It's a right skew, it's not left skew. When you cross here is on the right. So right skew is usually.
System.
And what's the difference between the gap between the top 10% and the bottom 10%? How it vary over time. You can see that in general it's quite stable, right?
yeah.
But during this time of COVID,
Yeah.
the gap here is larger. The gap between the top 2% and the bottom 10% also reflects the dispersion or the dispersion of the disagreement among households about the future inflation rate. And this makes sense because yes, during this time of COVID and the economic uncertainty is very large, so that's why people hold different view about the future economic condition. So that's why we can see that during the time of pandemic, especially at the first few months of the pandemic, the people are very uncertain about the future economic condition because it's very new situation. It's the first time we experience such kind of pandemic. So that's why the uncertainty during this time is very large, and then it's going down a little bit after 2 months of the pandemic, and then the gap is going up again because of the high inflation. Yeah, so from 2021, the inflation start going up in the US, so that's why the heterogeneity and dispersion about people belief about the future inflation is going large. So, yeah. Okay, so that is the first one is the average inflation rate and the median inflation rate, how it will look over time and how it will with the actual realized inflation rate. And now we can see the impact of demographic characteristics on how people form inflation expectation. And first, genders and income, and the blue line here is female, and the red line is for male. Maybe one of you can tell something about that, and maybe.
So in general, the expected inflation of female is always higher than male. Maybe because they expect that the goods specific for female may be higher than the goods for male.
Yes, that's one reason we already discussed, right? And but other reasons, just to review what we discussed. Now, in the
female is like more cautious, male is like how to say in the previous step we said that like male is like more more certain or something.
yeah, regarding to the certain and uncertain, but the certain or uncertain it reflects in the uncertainty. But here it's not about the uncertainty, right? It's about on average the level of inflation expectation. So the certain and uncertain it reflects on who are more likely to answer the question about inflation, right? Or how confident they are when they provide the answer. The uncertainty whether it's large or small. But here that's about the point forecast. And
I think because the female they can say they interact with the price change directly in food, gasoline, and another in daily routine. So they have impressed that the price is so high, and also compared to maybe memory buyers, they remember last time the price not too much, but now it's so high. So they imagine that the inflation is also high than male. And another is about the literature, financial literature. At last time, financial literacy. Last time we say that the female have the lower level compared to male, so they cannot recognize correctly about the situation. So
yeah. So two reasons, as you mentioned. First, the females in the literature they find that the main difference here because females they often go to shopping market, and the frequency of the shopping market and grocery, that is the main driver of the difference between female and male regarding to inflation expectation and perception. Because in the grocery and items or food items, the price volatile is much higher
Yeah.
than in other items in the CPI basket, like typical spending or other items. So that's why the female they often have a higher interest expectation compared with male. And the second reason we get into the financial literacy, and we can see that female they often have a lower financial literacy compared with male, and male they also more interested in financial topic, and they may be more likely to participate in the financial market compared with female. So that's why they read more news about economic news regarding to inflation and central bank topic. So that's why the inflation expectation is lower compared with female and closer to the actual inflation rate. Yeah. So that's the two main reasons to display the gap between female and male. And in our topic, in our discussion, our group assignment, we have one group working on the role of financial literacy and joining the central bank on the formation of inflation expectation. So maybe this group you can check whether female and male they have financial literacy. So you just check the financial literacy level between male and female in our data in the ECB survey of consumer expectation to confirm whether female have lower financial literacy compared with male or not. And this is additional result that you can provide to us to confirm whether male and female they have different level of financial literacy in the ECB survey. So here is the IRES survey, but we can confirm our result with the ECB survey as well. Yeah.
Okay, can I ask is it possible to say that women, like in general, buy a larger variety of goods compared to men? Like the
Yeah.
number of products, of different products that women have to see and buy. And that is the first one. And second one is that, have you ever heard of the word pin tax? Pin tax?
Impact.
Yeah, it's like the same product for women and men. For example, like shampoo or razor, things like that. But like they would have to pay much more than that.
That could be as well. Yeah, but I think this have been looked at it, yes. But yeah, but they also discuss that also potential impact of female and male, so different regarding to the consumption basket between male and female. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. And yeah, the next graph here we have different level of income under 50K, from 50K to 100K and over 100K, how it developed over time. And maybe one of you can give some comments about how the difference of inflation expectation of the next 12 months across different level of income.
Really interesting. It seems like the higher your income, the lower your expected inflation.
Yeah.
Maybe like if when you want to live to a certain level of wealth, you don't really mind like if the price of like a bread changing from $2 to $3, it doesn't make much difference to you maybe.
That could be the difference regarding to the consumption basket between the high income and low income, right?
Yeah. And for more about the impactation, I think if under 50K, so the impact of the higher price will make them impressed rather than the other person.
That could be so the poor people they are more likely to attract with the pricing.
Higher income, so it's associated with higher financial literacy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
good point.
Yeah, so there
Higher
also difference regarding
financial
the consumption basket, the first thing.
Mm.
And the second thing is mainly driving the difference here is regarding to the financial literacy because of high income household they are more likely to participate in the financial markets, right? Because they have some not a lot of money, but they have some money And here, this graph is not so the actual inflation rate this time, but if we add one more line for the actual inflation rate, so the actual inflation rate will be something like this one, right? Yeah, so the actual inflation rate will be something like this one, and it means that the forecast error of the high income household is to be closer, smaller. The forecast error of the high income household compared with the realized inflation or actual inflation rate will be smaller compared with the lower income household, right? Because now if we look at it here, the graph here, we can see that here is the realized inflation rate. The red line here is the realized inflation rate, and on average, we find out the before is after bias, right? And here is the average inflation rate. So it means that the low income household will be in this line, right? And the high income household will be in this line, right? So that's why we have average here is in this line, right? So it means that the low income household, the expectation will be like this one, right? And this the gap between the expectation and the realized inflation will be larger compared with the high income household will be something like this one, right? So the forecast error of the high income household on the forecast error of inflation will be smaller for high income household and larger for low income household.
So can I ask, like, what is the unit of income 100K, like, per household for number of people?
On household, at the household level.
Okay.
Yes.
So US dollar?
Yeah, US dollar. Yeah.
A year.
Yeah, they classify in three groups here. It's a household income per year, not per month. But the question is good because we also different between personal income and household income, right? Household income plays a group of also household members.
So like maybe like there is a chance that they all have very high positions in corporate, or they are also firm owners or business owners. So that's the reason why they have some
No, they already combine.
information.
No, they combine all the income sources already. So from the shell income or and the next graph we have an education level and yes, so education first. What is a thing you can see from this graph? Three level income education has school, some college degree and college degree. Yeah. But we can see
Category of the one that hold college degree is much smaller than the other two that doesn't hold college degree.
yeah, exactly. So we can see it quite similar to this picture, right?
Yeah.
So similar to the income levels, we also have the education level. It's very similar. So the higher education, they also have a lower inflation expectation. So all the results is consistent with each other. And since the education, income, and financial literacy is highly correlated. So that's why we have these pictures. Some college degree and high school is sometimes not so much different, but the college degree they are significantly lower compared with other education group, and it means that they also have a lower forecast error compared with the other people. And how about the age structure? Now we have the young under 40 years old, and the middle age from 14 to 60, and the older from 60 years old. Can you see anything?
If can say so, I think it's memory bias
Yeah.
because they compare the price to the past.
Yeah.
So they recognize the big gaps and they image that the price is too high at
Yeah, but you mentioned is the point you mentioned about the lifetime experience. Yeah, for example, if they live through the time of high inflation in the US, for example, in the 1980 or 1970, in the recent history in the advanced economy, there
Yeah.
only one time of high inflation from 1950 until now. It's a recent time of 1970 and 1980, early 1980. But it's time of high inflation in advanced economy, including the US. So those who live through that period, they often have higher inflation expectation because they have a memory and they also have a lifetime experience.
Already
about
happened.
those periods.
Can I ask that? By memory, they are having like under 40, so it's like from 16 to 40, right?
Yeah, so it's
I think they all have memories, so I think
no, yeah. That's
they all live, they all
That's all.
become adult.
Under 40 years old means that they start the survey from 2013, for example, and 40 years old means that they just was born in, so it's beginning in 1980, right? So they have no experience about the recent time of high inflation. So that's why you can see that under 40 years old, in general, they have a lower inflation expectation compared with the older, the middle age and over 60 years old, right? Because middle age and over 60 years old will experience time of high inflation in the US compared with the very young.
Oh,
Because those who just was born in the 1980s or 1985, they live in kind of very stable and low inflation. So that's why they think that inflation would be one of the
well, I just know this age is kind of tricky compared to other one because like so
Yes.
someone when they reach a new range of age, so they will become another line.
Yeah.
If they are re-interviewed and surveyed again, so before they were the blue line, and then a few years later, they will join the red one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true. It also linked with other demographic characteristics as well. But here, look for the big pictures and for the summary statistic, we also can see that in general, the that they have lower inflation expectation compared with middle age and old, because especially, the gap is it's not too much, but in the direction we can see that the young they have a lower inflation expectation compared with the old and the middle age because of the lifetime experience. And actually in the literature, there is one paper by Cornelia. She's a very famous economist and behavior economist, and she's the first one who discovered the role of lifetime experience on how people form expectation and participate in the financial markets. And she finds that those who live through the time of stock market booming, so people they are more likely to participate in stock market. Yeah. And those who live through the time of high inflation, they also more likely they have the experience of high inflation in their memory. Even they just respond to the time of high inflation, it means that in 20 years old they cannot remember anything about the time they was born, but their parents still talking about price level in the house. So that's why even they was born at very small price in the house during the time of high inflation, they still heard a lot of story about the high inflation during that time. So it's still important. So it's important when we respond. So now you may think about when you was born and where the economic condition during that time, what happened during that time might be also important foundation for what you are thinking about. Okay. So now you can check whether you was born during the time of economic booming or during the time of recession. And also different because it affects to how the people are more likely optimistic or pessimistic. So in economics, we Yeah, so especially in macroeconomics, we often think about whether we are getting kind of high economic booming or recession to see whether we are more likely to get a shock, right? That is in macroeconomics, but in behavior economics, they also look at when we was starting point. Yeah. And it's also important to how we form our behaviors and experience. And based on that, also, it's important factor to influence how people form their belief about the future. It's not only about expectation about price level, but also you expect about the income level and which preference where you are, which level or which others. It's also important as well. And whether you just want in terms of recession or quick recession or so sometimes we have to look back to see where we are at. So it's important. And in the experiment, they want to check whether there's a role of life and the real experience, or if we just provide some historical data to someone to see if they look at some historical data, like for example, if they look at the historical data of high inflation in the past, but they actually haven't experienced any kind of high inflation, for example. Even if we under 40 years old here, for the very young people here, the time series data about the high inflation periods in the 1960 or 1970 or 1980, that data have no impact on how the young people will behave. But so the results here and the experiment here, they want to confirm that the real lifetime experience is more important than just give them some data or historical data. So we have to have some experience. So it's exactly by learning by doing. It's not only go to the lesson and learn something from the lecture, but you have to practice and gain some real experience. It's much more powerful to form your expectation and confidence. So that was a big thing. Yeah, that is a behavior macro. And the next graph, we got into the race. And here they distinguish between the white and black. Can you tell me something about the difference between the white and the black? Black and the race between people in the US about how they.
It's very easy to see that the white people just behave like rich and high educated, like higher financial literacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And somehow it's also interesting to see that like people have like their expectations about inflation like vary a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That exactly. You can see that white people is quite stable, right?
Yeah.
And actually during this time, the interest rate also, the actual interest rate also will be pretty stable during this time. And the white will also can be pretty stable as well and close to the actual interest rate. But the black one here is so this agreement and the dispersion among the white, so the black here is very large, so very volatile. And they have on average interest rate of the black here is higher than on the white people. But the gap here is smaller, right? The gap is smaller during this time of high inflation or inflation going up, because in this time the black here there is also paying attention to the news about inflation, and then the gap is somewhat smaller, but yeah, on average we can see that the black hold higher inflation and more volatile about the level of inflation. And in sense, as we see here, we get into education and also to the income level. We can see with data, we can see very clearly that the white people they often have a higher level of education and income compared to the Taiwan and the Asian,
Asian.
and also the difference between the Taiwan and the Asian regarding to the finance policy. To see what's different. Okay, so maybe on Tuesday. Then because in the daytime we have all the demographic and the register for the white, black, and Asian as well. But the reason they use just white and black is because there's a two main reason in the US compared with other demographic like Asians or Latin American. And the last graph here regarding to financial literacy, and between the high financial literacy and the low of financial literacy. Now we can see very clearly, right, the difference between the high financial literacy and the low financial literacy. But the high financial literacy, they have a low expectation and closer to the actual interest rate compared with the low financial literacy. Yeah, so all the graph here, they're from financial literacy, age, education, income, and gender. Here you also can play with ECB consumer expectation survey. So the data now for us also available, right? Now from 2020 to 2025. So you also can draw some graph like this one, just to see whether in the European households, the expectation is also similar characteristic like in the US because regarding to income, education, gender, and also age as well to see any difference over time. And one more thing that is not possible for the US is that with the ECB survey of those expectations, you can look at the difference between the countries level. That's all, yeah. I think you can solve the graph. I think yesterday, you see here. Yeah, so here's the graph for the ECB survey approach expectation. But now we look at how inflation expectation in the European areas varies over time and also different across the countries, whether like PE, Belgium, Germany, Spain, France, Italy, and the Netherlands. Maybe 2 minutes for all of you to see the different across countries and about how to perform expectation over time from 2020 to September 2025. This is from our data set, and yesterday I produced this graph, but we have no time to discuss. But now we have 2 minutes to look at this picture and tell me what is your impression with this graph. Here's the average, the mean of inflation expectation in the Euro area across countries, and after excluding the top 2.5% and the bottom 2.5% distribution for each countries in each month of the survey.
so we can see that. So first, Italian people always expected much higher inflation rate
Yeah,
compared to other countries.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are periods that it seems like they are moved in a line.
Yeah,
For example, like the same peak.
yeah, that's a big, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we can see that here in the
Spain.
of the pandemic, beginning of the pandemic, the people also expect high inflation, but just 2 months of the pandemic, and then the inflation expectation is going down and then going up again from the middle of 2021. From the middle of 2021 rates, the actual inflation rate in the euro area start going up, and especially during the first month or the first 2 months of 2022, with going very fast. Inflation rate in the euro area going very fast because of the war in Ukraine,
Yeah.
and then the peak of inflation rate in the euro areas at the end of 2022. So in the October of 2022, inflation rate in the euro area at 11% or 10.8% in the euro area, and that's why people in this time they expect very high interest rate in the next 12 months. And after the peak of October 2022, interest rate in the euro area is going down, and that's why the people they also expect the level of interest rate also reduced. But we can see the across countries member here, we can see the Italian, they also very high inflation expectation compared with other countries. And now
Does
we,
geography location play a role, like how this country, whether they are close to each other or like they are quite far apart? Like those group, like Germany, Netherlands, and France, they seem like
very close to
the
the
whole kind of like all cluster, and then far away, like a bit further away, then you have Italy, like like
Yeah.
quite different.
Yeah, that would be something. And now we are thinking about where at the moment we also have one project to study why different countries here they hold very different inflation expectation. We find that it's very hard to explain why Italian they have higher inflation expectation compared with other countries, and Spain as well, Spain and Spain also have relatively high inflation expectation compared with the rest of the countries like in Germany, Netherlands, and France. So Germany, Netherlands, and France is the expectation interest rate is quite close to each other, but for Spain and Italy, especially for Italy, they have higher interest expectation. And now we check what drives the difference here. So we looked at the roles of macroeconomic condition. For example, now we control for macroeconomic condition the lifetime experience of in the history of inflation rate, and also the role of financial policy across the country member to see whether different countries they also have different level of financial policy, demographic, age, income, education, equal to everything. But still, significantly different between the Italian and the other countries about how people form expectation. So our results of that potentially because of different cultures and there's some cultural aspect here in driving the difference across the how people form inflation expectation. But we still don't know yet which is the specific features of culture here to explain why Italian they hold higher inflation expectation compared with other countries. And we can compare the difference here because the old countries where they use the same format of the questionnaire, they conducted harmonized surveys of consumers of the ECB, so the format of the question, the wording, everything is the same and conducted by the same company. So must be something about the cultural aspect here and drive the Philippines, but we still don't know just what is the culture specifically drive of the Philippines. But yeah, we still looking and searching for why different people level of inflation expectation. And why it's important to study that? Because you know that at the ECB and the Eurozone, they have only one single policy, right? So one policy interest rate. So that's why they need to understand how to perform expectation to manage and to anchor the level of inflation expectation. And one more thing you can see from this picture quite clearly about the dispersion of the inflation expectation over time. So in the time of low inflation, there's a dispersion is very small, but in the time of high inflation, the dispersion is very large. It means that the heterogeneity of inflation during the time of high inflation is much larger than the time of low inflation. So it means that it's more challenging for the ECB to manage inflation in the euro area during the time of high inflation. So it's a very challenging for the ECB to do so.
What is the question? What was the question exactly? Because even though we see that the expectation of Italian people is really high,
Yeah.
but maybe they experience inflation in that country like higher than
Yeah, we already control for the lifetime experience of all the countries member here already. So we already calculate the lifetime experience of each household in the whole euro area for the country specific as well. Yeah, so it's not driven by the lifetime experience or the historical interest rate in that country.
So what was the question here? Like inflation in their country or inflation in Eurozone and others?
Inflation in their countries. So the question here they ask what do you think about the inflation rate in your countries in the next 12 months? Yeah, they don't. So the survey here asks for each for their own country. Okay, it's not about asking for the whole euro area. What do you think about the inflation rate around this in the euro area? They ask what do you think about inflation rate in your country in the next 12 months? Okay. Yeah. And this is a graph I produce also from the same picture here. So from this graph, we can calculate the standard deviation across countries member. The dispersion rate for standard deviation across countries member here, and then we have another graph to show that is the dispersion. The dispersion here is the standard deviation across countries member over time, and now we can see very clear that during the time of high inflation here, the dispersion is much higher than the time of low inflation, right? So it means the time of high inflation is tough for the ECB to manage inflation in the euro area. Okay. Okay, so now we look at another relationship, the relationship between inflation perception and expectation. To see how to perform expectation in the future, right? We want to see whether the whole of the perception, the current perception about the current state of the economy and how it links with the future belief about the future inflation. So here we have the dimension perception of inflation and expected inflation of the next 12 months. And what is the correlation between the inflation perception and expected inflation?
Very close to one.
Yeah,
Possibly relationship.
yeah, it's a very significant and positive correlation between the inflation perception and inflation expectation, right? So if you expect or if you think that inflation is the last 12 months, about 4%, it's very likely that we also expect that inflation in the next 12 months also around 4%, right? So, it is, do you think it is challenging or it's good news for the central bank, for the ECB, for example, or for the central bank in general? Especially with the time of high inflation.
Yeah.
Why?
So they can, I mean, they can affect direct inflation expectation among of citizen through communication.
I think the opposite.
Is it correct to say if the correlation is strong, like then the people are like more backward looking because they kind of like their perceived inflation is
Yeah, exactly. If the correlation is stronger, it means that they are more backward looking. Or the forward looking and the backward looking is quite similar. In that case, we can assume that the expectation is equal to the past 2 months expectation or perception. And so this graph, so there are two implications. First thing is, one thing is it could be a good news for the central bank that we can, if we can correct the inflation perception, we also can correct the inflation expectation, right? Because it's a strong relation between perception and expectation. And we know that people, they often miss information about the current state of the economy. They don't know what is the actual inflation rate of the economy, and that's why inflation perception is always upward bias as well. So if we provide more information about the current inflation rate, they also can correct their perception about the current state of the economy, the current state of the inflation, and then if we can reduce the level of inflation perception, they also can help to reduce the level of inflation expectation, right? So they can anchor inflation expectation just by correct people understanding about the truth level of the current state of inflation level, right? That's the first thing. But the challenging here is that during the time of high inflation, during the time of high inflation, even that the time of high inflation would be very temporary, very short term, but if they find that the inflation now is high, it means that the future inflation is still very high.
Yeah.
For example, in this time of recent inflation surge in 2022, if the actual inflation rate about 10%, it means that people also form the future inflation in the next 2 years or next 5 years still about nearly 10%. And maybe that is wrong perception, wrong expectation
Yes.
of the surge in inflation here could be very temporary. So this could be the challenging for the central bank to correct the people belief about the future inflation. So in that case, the central bank needs to provide further information about what to expect about the future inflation or what the forecast about future inflation so that they can correct the expected inflation rate. Because in the time of high inflation, what we just say about now the actual inflation rate of 10%, for example, so it means that people will believe that the future inflation also will be 10% in the next 2 years or next 3 years. And it's very far from the target of the central bank at 2%.
Yeah. So it means it's just not 1 year, right? So it is like many years.
Yeah,
It's
so,
consistent over many years like this.
yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And here is the data for the US, but you also can check with the data for the Eurozone as well for the ECB, so the expectation. You check the link between the inflation perception and expectation and tell me what is the correlation between these things. And it's also quite easy to see as well with the data because we have inflation perception and we also have data on inflation expectation, right? So you can check when you work on your own project or presentation, you can run one more regression about the inflation expectation on inflation perception to see the correlation between these two variables.
It means like if there is a sudden change, like from low to really high, or vice versa, really high to like low, so people will like adjust their beliefs, and it's hard for the central bank to help them to know that it's temporary.
Yeah.
Like, we will get back on track soon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That is very point. And one more thing. For the next graph. And here also inflation perception. Here is the perception. And here's expectation. And here is the relationship between the perception and expectation for expectation for 1 years ahead. Okay. And now if we have another graph, two scenarios. Here is expectation, for example, 3 years ahead, and expectation here is 3 years ahead. Yes. For example, in the data here we know that the link between inflation expectation 1 years ahead and with the perception. And now we also have data on expectation for 3 years ahead, right? And here is two possibilities that we can draw from the graph, that we can draw from the data. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. To think that which possibility is more likely to happen in the data. Which possibility more likely to happen if we draw the link between expectation 3 years ahead with the inflation perception? 1 or 2. Which scenario is more likely to?
The further away the correlation should be weaker.
Flat. Flat.
I think it's
Two.
2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 is more likely to happen because exactly as you mentioned, the link between the long horizon with the perception is weaker compared with the short-term horizon, because what we expect today, perception today is more likely to link with tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow the link is smaller.
Yep.
So 3 years ahead and perception, the relationship will be smaller. Right? So this one is more likely. Right? And this one is less likely. Because the longer horizon expectation, the link with perception will be lower. Yeah, but we also can check the data as well, because in ECB survey we also have 1 year ahead and 3 years ahead, right? So you can check to just confirm some of the data. And the next question here, we look at what are the main economic information sources to form inflation expectation, whether it's coming from the energy use, shopping experience, gathering of TV or work activity, newspaper, social media, right? So last 2 days we also discussed about the different role of different information sources, right? From radio, TV, or newspaper, or social media, on the main economics in functional sources to form inflation expectation, and they have different sources here. And the main dark blue here is very important, and then the blue one here is somewhat important, and then so not very important and don't know a lot of people. Right? So tell me what you see in from this graph. What are the main economic information sources to form inflation expectation?
Very important is energy use and shopping experience.
Yeah, so very important here is
Energy.
energy use, right?
shopping experience
And then shopping experience,
ក៏មិន
and followed by the government report and some appointments and TV and social media actually the rules. So that's important sources for people to form expectation. But the main here is that if we look at what is very important and somewhat important, we can see that the main driver this thing is from energy use and the shopping experience, and followed by the government report like central bank report or fiscal policy or national monetary entities and so on. So, but the two main drivers here is energy use and the shopping experience. So here is a salient price, right? So it changes more frequently, and that's why the think how people form the belief about inflation. So because of the fuel price or the heating price, especially in advanced economy, is cold area. So the heating price and the gas price is and the electricity is important for them to form expectation. And the shopping experience is also very important as well. So that's why we see the significant difference between male and female when they form expectation, right? And now we have data to confirm that belief, right? But actually the people they form expectation mainly based on their shopping experience, like grocery or some daily life item. That is the main source of the information. It's not about the whole basket of the CPI basket, right? So like from durables or many other items in the CPI basket. Yeah. And social media here turn out to be a very small impact on people when they form expectation. TV also plays some role, but it depends on the selling price that they actually experience by themselves. Yeah. And now go to the 3 point about the different items. The role of different items, price change when people form expectation. Yeah, for example, now we can see that it's from grocery or shopping experience, but now quick product in the shopping experience is more important for people to form expectation. Right? So now we know in more detail, for example, for the shopping experience here, right? And also for the energy bill here, they separate here in things like fuel, eggs, or meat, or dairy, milk, bread, or other items like banking or clothing or some travel activity. Right? And what you can see from this graph,
I think the products that they have to use almost every single day, many times a day. For example, like the fuel, gas, or petroleum, or electricity, and the eggs or the food that they have to eat daily really like drive their expectations about inflation.
yeah, exactly. So here, maybe one more comment from other people.
I think it's consistent with the previous show. Like, within the energy, and you have the fuel here, and within the consumption basket here, we can see in more detail is like what items. Surprisingly, eggs, and then poultry is meat and poultry is
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so now you can see that here's the four main items here, right? From the fuel, first thing is consistent with the energies and the gasoline price. So the fuel here is obviously the most important one, followed by surprisingly eggs and meat and dairy like milk here also important. And rice milk here is very important for the US, or eggs here because they like it, and also like coffee, and when they drink coffee they also drink milk as well, so that's why milk is so important. But I think it could be different for if you ask for Vietnamese people, right? So
Yeah.
it might be
Rice.
interesting to see how Vietnamese people they think about different items here, the importance of different importance here on the formation of inflation expectation. So in Vietnam, which item do you think that is most important for Vietnamese household that they form expectation?
Gasoline. Fuel. Also
Also fuel.
fuel.
Yeah,
First.
so first thing here may be consistent across country
Yeah.
level, right? Across countries.
And second,
as
It
I
would be eggs.
eggs was
would be
also
like,
important, or
rice.
vegetable. Rice,
rice, yeah.
of course, rice.
Nice.
rice, vegetable. Milk, I don't think is important, right? Or maybe somehow.
I think coffee would be there.
Or ramping, I think ramping would be. Not so much because they also can.
Then maybe if we how they do the survey in Ho Chi Minh City, so red you might not be, you might be like the first one.
Yeah. So this study is this guy type study here is in advanced economy and Western country. So maybe it's interesting to conduct similar surveys here in Vietnam or in developing country. For example, to see which type item is more sensitive for people when they form expectation about the future price, right? And it would be very interesting to see how people form their belief and why is that private forget it, right? The upward bias here is driven by different items, right? And it's going to have to be quite consistent with a story like this one, different sources of the information and different type of product. So if we go in more detail, for example, if we look at this one and now we can see the difference between male and female, maybe you can see it's more clearly, right? And you can answer the question about whether male and female they buy different items, which item is more important. Maybe the same picture here, but again, it's still between male and female to see whether they still have the same or similar, right? But in this paper, they didn't solve it, so I don't know. But this data available, we can check whether it's different between male and female regarding to this picture, and then we can answer the question, right? To some extent. And the last picture for this paper regarding to how to forecast error vary over time, but we already discussed it during the first round already. What's the difference between the expectation and the realized situation? Okay, so I think we have some minutes break before